Peereboom. He's also known as Decred Moses. All right. So there's a theme running on their team because one of the other gentlemen that's on their team loves to talk about Decred, and he was known as Decred Jesus. And when I saw both of them in person, if one's Jesus, the other one, he looks like Decred Moses to me. So I'll go with that. All right. So they have an interesting project, guys. Marco is from the Decred project. They're based out of Austin and Waco, right? And their project is, to me, is extremely unique because they are solving a very massive problem in the Bitcoin space. A lot of you guys may or may not know there's a Bitcoin civil war going on right now between the Bitcoin core team and the Bitcoin Cash team. On the Bitcoin core team, they want Bitcoin to become a store of value, right, similar to gold, and then make all the electronic currency transactions on top of that. And then on the Bitcoin Cash team, they want to make the currency transactions right on top of the chain. Now, on the surface, it appears that that's what the problem is, and that's what the argument is, or what the debate or the issue is, but that is just a surface problem, okay? The underlying problem is that the Bitcoin does not have what's called a governance process. Now, when we say governance process on our channel, a lot of people always say, why do all those Asians always want the government involved, right? And governance has nothing to do with the government. It can be, but it does not have anything to do with the government. It's governance is the technical term for a final resolution process or a final decision-making and implementation process. And Decred Moses here will go more into what that means. And they saw this problem. They're just one of those teams that get it, like I was talking to you guys about. And they saw this problem back in 2011, 2012, when they got into the blockchain space. So they started building Decred to solve this problem. And what happens is because Bitcoin does not have a way to make a final resolution on how the network needs to be updated, things such as SegWit, the SegWit update that needs to be added to the Bitcoin network to make it better or to allow for second layer currency transactions to go on top of it, right? It's taking like 3 years now for the Bitcoin network to update this software. And this battle is caused because there's no final resolution process called a governance process, okay? So you ready, Decred Moses? All right, so everybody give a hand to Decred Moses here. Right.
Hi, everybody. So let me thank Ty and for his nice words, very friendly words. Thank you, Ty. You give me way more credit than I really am due. So I appreciate that. So let's just jump into it. Let me first tell you who I am. I'm Marco Peereboom. I'm the guy that sits between you and lunch, so you may not like me very much, but I'm going to try to keep it somewhat quick. So what I do at Decred is I'm the new systems development guy. That typically means I work on stuff that has not been released yet, or it's just an idea, and we're just going to try to see if we can make it work. So proof of concept type of work, things, again, that may or may not work, investigative coding, and sometimes I get into the nitty-gritty, work on some blockchain-related things, but typically new systems. I'm also the CTO of Company Zero. That is the organization that originated Decred, and that's really all that's about that. Let's keep going. So today we're going to talk about Decred and find out what it is and what you can use it for. I'm going to go a little quick because, again, I know you guys are hungry. So what is Decred? So Decred is digital autonomous currency, and we created it to address, as Ty said, a crisis in Bitcoin. So we saw this crisis coming, I want to say at about 2012, 2013, we were active in the Bitcoin space, and all our code contributions were, for some reason, not always welcome. So somehow we were rocking the boat, and we were messing with the power structures, and that was not always appreciated, which is unfortunate because we had some pretty good code and some ideas that we were trying to get out there. So as we ran up against that wall, we figured out that maybe the Bitcoin community was not as open as they claimed it to be. So we started doing our own little thing, and that actually set the stage for Decred. So we went about it, so what is it that we can do to prevent these infights and these power struggles from fracturing a project, breaking a project, pitting one community against one another? And that's where we came up with the governance system. So in the governance system is an opt-in, so that means you need to actively participate in. But what it does is it gives you, the user or the stakeholder, capability to influence what happens next. So what is next for the network? And those are sometimes very big questions, right? I mean, for the folks that do follow Bitcoin, there's been a fracturing of the community. If you go back 1 year, the word hard fork would cause people to, shake in their boots and, oh, we cannot ever do this. And, by last year we had 3 forks. By the end of this year, easily 50. So, and that is just unhealthy for the overall community. It is fracturing it. And, if you hear the Bcash people yelling at the Bitcoin people, it's just not helpful. Now that I use all those big words, really, what is Decred? So we're going to go dig into some of these features that we have and some of the things that we do, and actually I'm going to actually put a little bit of a business spin on there for you. So I am an engineer by nature, so I'm going to say big words, and please stop me and ask questions. So here it is. Here's the statement. So Decred is freedom that enables you to take charge of your business financial future. And this actually goes back to all the things that Ty described earlier. That there is financial freedom can only exist if you can disintermediate yourself from pesky middlemen, as Ty called it. We got to get rid of those rent seekers. They provide no useful service. They literally just cost you money, and again, they provide no useful service typically. All right, a lot of words. We're going to go bullet by bullet. So Decred enables you to be your own international bank. So because Decred is borderless, you can transact with anyone in the world at any given time. So within minutes, you can send funds or value. You can transfer value to anywhere on the planet, and therefore reach a much wider audience than you could typically do in your local environment. So Decred is permissionless, censorship-resistant value store and transfer. What does that mean? It means you can be your own bank, right? You are the one who controls what happens next. You're no longer beholden by the bank liking your business or not liking your business. So anyone who has run a business before knows that the bank might just shut you down. And really no reason given, you have no recourse, it just happens because, yeah, we don't like you, so go away. And there's nothing you can do about it, literally nothing. So Decred provides access to international unbanked and underbanked audiences. That is also a big thing. So if you go look around the world and look at all the folks that actually have bank accounts, it's, we live in America, it's relatively easy to get one here, but there's a huge group of people in the world that do not have access to that. So with a cryptocurrency like Decred, you can provide those people with the same capability as a traditional bank would. So Decred is trustless banking. You don't have to trust anybody, right? You only have to trust yourself. You have to manage your own keys, and you can do as you please. You are not beholden again by regulation and other bad things that will sit between you and your business. So Decred is fraud resistant. Anyone who has run an online shop here, how many folks, let's do some hands. So how many folks have had payments reversed by the credit card company? Everybody, right? And sometimes it's just, and very often it is not. It's just pure and, pure fraud. It's just what it is. So you know what? With Decred, you as the business owner, you get to say when you reverse the costs, right? So if somebody was shipped a broken item, of course you're going to refund them, right? That is nothing but fair. But having somebody just call the credit card company and say, yeah, I don't like how this transaction went down, they will reverse it for you, right? Because they are always going to side with the consumer, or most of the time they will side with the consumer. So in Decred, oh, wrong button. I found out I have a laser, so I'm going to have to use it. So Decred is stability through governance. So I'm going to dig a little bit more into the governance thing, but what that means is you, the stakeholders of folks that deal with Decred, you have a say. You get to control what happens next. You get to vote on the rules of the network. And I will get into more detail on that, but what that will do is it will prevent things like forks in Bitcoin, which again are a little bit poisonous. So let's talk about some other use cases in Decred. So we have proof of existence via DCR time. I have a slide for that one, so I'm going to go into some detail on that. But what that does is it enables anybody here to write an application that can be used in the regulatory environment. Governance through Politeia. Politeia is our voting platform. And that one is actually pretty generic. And if you spend a little bit of time and hack it up a little bit, you can use it for all kinds of other things. So I have a slide for that one too. We're going to go into that one. So we have recently, actually through the governance system, we enabled Lightning. I love this laser. So we enabled all the primitives for Lightning, and that will give you all kinds of cool things, features such as pretty immediate payments, and it's awesome tech. We're still working on that one. Going to get at that one as well. So trustless exchanges, cross-chain atomic swaps. So that is a huge, huge deal. We wrote the code that I think at this point pretty much everyone is using that. So the front-end utilities that actually do this. What this does is it enables you to disintermediate exchanges. By show of hands, who has dealt with a crypto exchange here? By a show of hands, how many people loved the experience? Right. So exchanges are not awesome, and again, they are. And I'm going to make some people unhappy, but they are one of those rent seekers that I was talking about earlier. Right. They are just sitting there to charge you a percentage of your hard-earned money, and the service they provide is not always useful. So how many people have lost their money to these exchanges and could not get it back? See, there's some hands in the back over there. So exchanges are a huge problem. They don't always have good security practices. And anyway, I can go on about that one for a while. But what cross-atomic swaps does is it means that I can have an agreement with anybody here. And I can say, hey, George, you want to buy some Decred? And George will say, sure, I'll give you some Litecoin. And we can agree on a price. We set the parameters, and off it goes. And there is no escrow. It's trustless. And we both receive our coins. It is one-to-one, but oh, okay. So the question was, can this be extended to a third party? So not just me and George, but me, George, and Don, right? That's what you were asking, right? So the way this works is that two people or two entities need to agree on the parameters, and there is no way around that. That is just required. So, but you and I can come to an agreement as well, right? So there is no. The only thing that we need to agree on is on the parameters. So I'm going to give you 2 Decred, you're going to give me a Litecoin, right? So and that will be essentially it. But you could not hijack my transaction with the other person. Does that make sense? So let's talk a little bit about DCR time. So DCR time is there's some big words up there. So it collects 32-byte digests and anchors them hourly in Decred blockchain. What does that mean? So for the non-technical folks, a digest is you take any piece of information and you reduce it to a non-reversible number, very large number that is made out of 32 digits, if you will. So that number is unique for that piece of code, or so for that piece of data that you did. So if you take a picture and you run it through one of these algorithms, a number is going to come out on the other end. If you take a different picture, a different number is going to come out of that. Even though that sounds very simple, it opens up very powerful additional things that you can do with this. So the big one that a system like DCR time gives you is proof of existence. Proof of existence is a very simple idea, right? So I can say, with this digest, I can prove that this document existed at this point in time. So since it's anchored into the Decred blockchain, you can actually give it to a third party, and they can look at it, and they, as a third party, they can verify that that document actually existed. And again, it's a very simple idea, but you can use this as the primitive to make much more complex and interesting regulatory and compliance type applications. So for example, if you are a lawyer firm and you have 1,000 lawyers on staff and they're all writing these Word documents, they love their Word documents. So at the end of the day, let's say you upload them all to the system, and you run them through one of those digests that I was talking about, and then they get anchored into the blockchain. So what that gives you is you know, as a business owner, at any given point in time, or for forevermore, that that document was generated at that point in time. So if you get audited, right, and somebody knows who knew what at what time, you have that answer instantaneously. So it is a very simple idea, but very, very powerful. And it can be extended in many ways. And actually, the Decred voting system relies completely on this very simple idea of proof of existence. So, so let's talk a little bit about generic blockchain anchoring techniques. What those can do for your business is you can take any nominal small amount of data and anchor it into the blockchain, just like we do with these timestamps, with these digests. So you can take a little bit of data that means something to you, but is irrecognizable or unrecognizable by a third party, but it can mean something, and you can use that to signal something to a third party. Actually, the cross-atomic swaps I was talking about earlier use that mechanism. So they put some magical data on the blockchain, somebody understands that data, and they can do something with it. So this is a very powerful primitive if you are an application developer in the blockchain, and you want to use blockchain technologies. So let me talk a little bit about Politeia. So Politeia is our tier 2 voting mechanism. Oof, lots of words. So in Decred we have 2 areas where we vote. We have on-chain voting, which is used for complicated protocol and consensus changes. So those are big decisions that require a big majority to pass. But those you use that when you're changing the rules. So a lot of people need to agree on changing the rules, because changing the rules may not work for you. So simpler things like, am I going to go to crypto in Frisco? You know, and it's not free, right? We have to drive up here. There's hotel rooms involved, right? You got to rent a room. So those things, that's more of a wish list type thing, right? So in those, let's call them marketing proposals, can be put up in this system. They get anchored again. So the data, the existence of that data gets anchored into the blockchain, not the data itself, and people can vote on it, right? So the stakeholders can say, we would love for Marco to go to Frisco. So so some of the features that are interesting is that we have a transparent censorship mechanism. So there are a lot of trolls on the internet, right? Everybody knows that. So trolls are not fun, but you have to deal with them. But if you have an open system like this for proposals, people are going to put some garbage in it. It's just going to happen. So what we are trying to do here is to you know, remove things like blatant racism or, you know, pornography, so, just stuff that we don't want our project to be associated with. So we are going to have some form of censorship. But if somebody makes a proposal and they feel that they have been slighted by one of the censors, they have a recourse. And this is what this means, the transparent censorship mechanism. What that means is when you make a proposal, you get a ID back. And that is your proposal ID. And with that ID, in a magic cryptographic number, you can prove that this is my proposal that I sent to these guys, and now you can make it a popularity contest. So you can say, these guys are bad people, they censored me, right? And that means that you have recourse. Social media is absolutely rife with censorship. So I am on Twitter, and I don't love Twitter, so sometimes I say ugly things about them, and within minutes, it's censored and it's gone, every single time, without fail. So, and it's worse, it's silent censorship, right? So they don't pat me on the hand and say, you're a bad person. No, it just disappears, it gets buried. So, and we really did not want people to feel that way. So I made a proposal and it got buried, right? People just voted us out. So you have recourse. You get to, you know, yell back at us. So, so let me talk a little bit about these. So simple audits with cryptographic accountability and attestation. So everybody who makes a proposal has an identity. So we can link people, right? And if somebody censors you, we know who censored you, right? So we can keep track of all these proposals through for all of eternity on the blockchain and make sure that, you know, somebody was not being treated unfairly. So a good example, what you could use one of these systems for is and we have done this one a couple of times now, is a proof of degree. So imagine a college. By the way, this is not going to happen because colleges love that, those $280 that you have to pay them to get your degree at. But let's, in an ideal world, give it a second, right? So let's say you take a class, and once you finish your class, the college or your professor puts proof in one of these systems saying this person has received so many credits for this class. So if you keep doing that over time, you would accumulate enough credits to own or receive a degree, right? So now a third party could come in and actually, independently of the university, pull out all this information and see, yep, it added up to 200 credit hours, we have a degree, right? So there's some really cool things that you could do with a system like this. And actually, a little plug, we have a party in Austin, actually on February 10th, where we have asked the community to come up with novel ideas on how to use Politeia. We still have some spots available, so if you guys want to sign up, come find me. I'll show you where to sign up. So there's going to be a cool Shark Tank type event where we're going to have some folks present their idea, and then you can make $10,000 in Decred. Decred Lightning. Okay, so I spoke a little bit about it. But what it does is it enables instant, micro, and continuous payments. And if we rewind a little bit and you go back to 2009, 2010, the big issue that remained unsolved in Bitcoin was that if you want to, get an Uber or a taxi and you wanted to pay the guy, you had to essentially wait an hour, right? So that is not great when you run a taxi business. You need to go to your next customer. So it was not great for instantaneous payments. And that has been solved with Lightning. So we have that. It is under development, but I'm just here to tell you that the bottom portions are done. So it's enabled on the blockchain, but you as a third party do not have access to it just yet. But it's weeks, not more than months away. So this one I spoke a little before my turn because I get excited about this one. So I've said this before, is that people should literally be dancing naked out in the streets on this one. This is big stuff. So you are no longer going to have to go to an exchange and exchange value with any person. So if you run a business and you receive Bitcoin in your business and you would like to actually convert that into Decred because Decred is awesome, you can do that, right? Because you just accumulated some Bitcoin. You find a counterparty that is interested in swapping with you, and there you go, right? You agree on the parameters, and you can convert your value. Or conversely, you accumulate Decred, but since Decred is not on so many exchanges, it would be great to be able to actually cash it out. Well, all right, convert it to Bitcoin, send it to Coinbase, and get it off, right? In US dollars. So it gives you a whole bunch of flexibility, and you can diversify your portfolio, right? So you can accumulate one or two, and then you can use these cross atomics without a exchange to basically diversify your crypto portfolio. So there's a lot of really, really good stuff in here. And I think this year, the rest of the community is going to wake up to this, and there's going to be a lot of code and cool projects that are going to come from this. So this code was actually originated in Decred projects. So currently we receive about 1 or 2 pull requests from the community from different crypto projects and say, hey man, would you guys add us to your thing? Here's the code. Sure, we'll just add you to the mix of people that we can do this with. It was recently modified to add one more primitive, and what that did is it actually enabled us to go from, I want to say about 20 or so cryptos that could be interchanged to over 1,300, so including Ether. So pretty much the entire portfolio at this point can be exchanged between one another. Not all the pairs exist yet, but they could relatively easily be made. So one notable exception is Monero. They use a much more complex signing mechanism. Somebody can write it, it just hasn't been done. But that is not one that does standard stuff. So that one would be a little bit more complicated. All right, so we wrote a little store for you. So what we did is we wrote a little piece of code that would demonstrate how you could integrate Decred into your website to receive payments, for example. So, by the way, this is real code. It actually runs and works, but it is just example code, all right? So let's get it out there. So don't go run your store on this. It needs more work. So what we did is we created 2 products, right? You pick one of the raspberries, and then you hit buy now. So then you get some instructions, and this is where it's get a little bit more complicated, right? This is where people see, ooh, that's an ugly QR code. But I'll show you a simpler version later. But this is currently the way crypto pretty much works, right? So there's an address that you're going to send money to, right? So you use your phone, you take a picture of that, right? And then you copy paste this magical address over here, and you send that amount of Decred to it. So the next step is, okay, we have received it, and now we are just waiting for the blocks to be mined. And we picked 0 out of 2 confirmations. So in Bitcoin, it's typically 6. In Decred, there's never been, as far as I know, any fork that's been more than 1 block. We have some interesting tech to prevent forking from happening. I can bore you guys with tears about that, so come find me if you want to get some of the details. Next step is, look at that. We have a completed payment, and now we can move on. So you have, at this point, if this was your store, you have received some Decred. Oh, let me go back here. It's going to be a little bit hard to read, but it says $35 over here. 35 US dollars and 10 US dollars. And the idea here is that we are actually pulling prices from from multiple exchanges and basically creating a weighted average, so that at this point it is reasonable to ask, what was it, 0.39 Decred for 35 bucks. Does that make sense though? So you quote US dollars, but you actually get paid in Decred. All right, so this is the store I was talking about. DCR payments, it is a little PHP piece of code. It's really not complicated for anyone who has worked on this before. We are actually going to put a couple more examples in here so that folks can actually use this code and modify it to meet your needs. But Marco, I don't want to do all that work, and I just want to get payments. All right. We have awesome companies like Gobly and Coin Payments that simplify this entire thing for you. So what they do is they create these little plugins that you just literally drop into your website, and they do exactly what we said there before. But you don't have to deal with any of the development work. You can literally just drag and drop one of these things in there and say, hey, I have a WordPress website, I sell widgets, and you can now at this point start receiving a whole bunch of different crypto coins. They accept scores of them. So this is also and they convert it immediately to fiat for you. So that may not be in your, depending on your goal, are you trying to accumulate US dollars, or are you trying to accumulate crypto? This may not be your right choice, right? So, but there's some work involved with this one, right? You would have to integrate it if you want to accumulate crypto. All right, so it is not all unicorns and rainbows. There's a lot of things that still need to be done. There's some folks working on some really incredible code to make this all simpler, and we work on that every day. So if you ask community members a year ago, so, hey man, that wallet of yours is really complicated. If you ask today, people say, hey man, you got one of the best wallets out there. So this takes time, and it's going to continue to get better, but it will take more time before it's going to be, so that grandma can use it, right? So there are some growing pains. Those are inevitable. So the on and off ramp is still a little complicated, right? Because you need to have a Coinbase account, or what's the other big one in New York? I forget the name. There's not one of the big exchanges out there where you can convert from crypto to US dollars, right? If you need that. Sorry? Bittrex, yeah. The Bittrex is crypto only, though. Yeah, Gemini, that's the one I was looking for. So there's a couple more of those. But customers are starting to demand it. So if you run a website and you're starting to cash in, there's more and more questions every day from people saying, hey man, can I just use my Bitcoin for that? Or can I use my Decred for that? And that's happening. So don't get left behind on that. And I really, truly believe that the whole crypto space is about to go mainstream. And that is good and bad. As a hacker, that's not going to be great for me, right? Because now everybody's in on my little toy. But it is healthy for the economy and for everyone else, because we have all this crypto value sitting in our crypto wallets, and we actually kind of want to put it to use, right? So my message here is don't miss out. Really, get yourself educated, get working on some of these, get working with some of these cryptocurrencies, integrate them into your website. Maybe the volume is low at first, but it'll start picking up because you're going to be the guy who said, hey man, have you seen that web store? They actually accept Bitcoin. I'm going to go use that one. And there's a lot of that going on right now. So, so don't miss out. Be one of the guys out there and, you know, make some money. Any questions?
Thanks, Marco.
And I have shirts for good questions.
All right. Okay, I got.
So I need a medium-sized person question.
There you go. Just if you could quickly explain what Lightning Network is.
I'm sorry?
If you could quickly explain what a Lightning Network is.
So the Lightning Network is a piece of code that sits on top of Decred consensus. That probably makes no sense to anybody here. So in software development, there's a thing called a stack. And that basically means there's software that runs here, 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 and here. So there's multiple layers to it. So in Lightning Network sits above the Bitcoin or Decred blockchain portion. And what that means is it can do things quicker and earlier than blockchain would do it. So in the way it works with Lightning is you create these things called payment channels. So once these channels have been created, you can, without any fear of losing your funds, make a transaction that is instantaneous. Now the value transfer has happened, but it has not been, you know, it has not made it into the blockchain just yet. So, so eventually it can be, right, it can be finalized on the blockchain, but it cannot be reversed, right? So you have achieved instant payments, and you know, even though there's a little bit of technology and a little bit of time involved in there, you can walk away, right? You, the cab driver, can drive off because that payment, you know, is not going to get reversed. Does that make sense? So it's something that sits above it, and it's not part of it, but works very, very closely and integrated to it. Are you medium?
So to follow up on that, how do you prevent double spending when you're doing off-chain instantaneous transactions?
First, I got to know, are you a large?
Extra large.
Magic crypto things. So I'm going to try to explain it, but this will quickly rat hole though. So, but the way it essentially works is when we open up a payment channel, is we both put in a maximum amount of spendable coin on both ends. So let's say the payment channel is for 10 Decred. So that would be $100, right? So $1,000. Now when we do the Lightning transaction, what it will do is there is some cryptographic mechanism that debits Decred on your end and credits it on my end, just like actually the blockchain itself would do. So, and at one point in time, what's going to do is going to be reconciliation. So all these transactions that have happened, by the way, we can make 1,000 transactions. We can be microtransactions. You could be a factory and you don't want to pay for parts in a warehouse. The way you could do that, Dell is famously for doing this, is what every time a part actually came from Intel, for example, CPU made it onto the factory floor, that's when it got paid for. So the trucks are literally waiting outside. And as the CPU makes it on the factory floor, that's when the credit happens. So in Lightning, you could keep this going, right? So you can, okay, here's a payment for a processor, here's the payment for a processor, right? You can just repeat that, and after a while, you reconcile that. But let's go back. So, but there is cryptographic magic that prevents a double spend. And there's cryptographic magic, just like on the blockchain, that will make sure that you will always get your coins and not going to get defrauded out of it.
The scenario I'm thinking of is you've got two different off-chain Lightning networks that
There's
you're
hundreds.
spending into at the same time.
But
And-
you have tied up coins with it. So when you open up your channel, you tied up coin at that point.
Okay.
So and that coin can no longer be used on a different chain. It can no longer be used at all, period, right? Because it's just sitting there
right.
on hold.
I'm a firm believer in crypto magic, so.
See? And there's a lot of it. All right. I have one more medium question left.
And who gets to determine in the air swap or atomic swap? Is that the protocol that determines when I'm trying to swap Decred with you for Bitcoin or something? How does the exchange or the ratio happens? Like, is it the protocol that determines?
No, so that's actually an excellent question, and this is one that I get asked often. Is like, so who determines the price? Well, you do. Again, you don't need an exchange, right? So if you think that owning 1,000 Decred is worth 10 Bitcoin, that could be the price you agree upon. So it's really the conversation we have. So let's say we meet online in IRC chat and say, I'm willing to give you this. If you're willing to take it, a market was made, right? It doesn't matter what an exchange determines. It matters what you and I determine. And part of setting up the transaction is you set up your parameters, I set up my parameters. But I also know what your parameters were, right? So we both insert each other's data, and if everything works out with crypto magic, at the very end, the atomic swap actually happens. So let's say I'm trying to swindle you, and I put a lesser amount of Decred in for that Bitcoin. The transaction is not going to get finalized because you put in the proper amount in your end, and I was the one trying to do something bad. The transaction is not going to happen, and this is why you don't need escrow. This is why we don't have to trust each other. If you do it right, it's going to happen. If you do it wrong, it is not going to happen. Yep, it is exactly like a marketplace, and everybody can make a market, right? It's just so, and people are starting to think about this, and so how do I find these people? And this is actually the current problem, right? So exchanges don't love this. They're going to get they're going to lose a little 5%. They're going to be unhappy. So, but somebody's going to come up with a really cool idea. It's like, what if we did an IRC channel where everybody yells what they want? You remember old Wall Street, people yelling at the guys? That could be step one, right? And then step two could be, you know what? All these people that are yelling on IRC, let's collect that information and keep that in a database that is searchable. Hey, that's starting to look like, like an order book, right? So this is extremely powerful technology, and over the next couple of weeks, months, you're going to start seeing people trying to monetize this and do something clever with it. It's going to be pretty sweet. Any other questions? Microphone?
We got a couple.
Okay.
We'll start over here. For Decred, what makes it so unique is the governance system, and just kind of what are your thoughts as far as what Decred does and the governance compared to other projects that you've seen?
Okay, yeah, so I actually kind of ran past governance. So are you guys okay with me blabbing for a couple of minutes? Because if you are, I'll go a little deeper into it. So there are really hard problems that sometimes need to be solved. So those are consensus and protocol changes. And essentially the network has to agree on those, because that's a big change, right? So if you say, I'm going to take this algorithm and I'm going to replace it with that algorithm, right? So the software is no longer compatible. So the majority of the network needs to understand these rules and obviously also these votes, right? And that is in a nutshell, how the on-chain voting works. So an agenda is made, and when an agenda is made, it means that the code that actually is going to provide this change is going to lay dormant. So then the vote happens, and then the vote finishes, and then there's a tally. If the tally says, okay, the community wanted to enable that feature, then there's a settling period, and then after the settling period, the code is flipped. No backsies, you cannot, right? Every vote is binding, and at the time of the vote, your bits are recorded, and there's no going back. So, so it goes through the process, and then boom, it changes. So we changed an algorithm that the miners did not love, because we were taking away a little bit of their percentage points, but it was hurting the network. So what was happening is, actually I'm not going to bore you guys to tears with it, but we were going to take incentive from one group and essentially remove it from the network, and the miners did not love it. But the community members wanted to even the playing field. So even though that would have been an absolute never going to happen in Bitcoin, right? Because the miners hold essentially all the power, because they are the ones that have write access to the ledger. So in Decred, that was a completely dramaless exercise. It was in fact actually boring. The vote passed with 98% of the votes, Banana Republic numbers. But the reason for that is that if you actually go look at what goes on in Bitcoin, there's like a bunch of people yelling and screaming at each other, over Twitter. But if you actually could gauge these people in a binding way, I promise you that that screaming would kind of stop happening. It would kind of go away because miners are incentivized to sell their Bitcoin as quickly as possible because they're going to pay for electricity and very expensive hardware. Stakeholders, they are probably want the network to be fast and secure, and right. So I want to be able to transfer my value within minutes and not pay $500 in fees, right? So these are conflicting interests, but the stakeholders in Bitcoin just don't have any power, right? And so what we did with the tier one on-chain voting stuff is to create incentives and carrots and sticks, so to keep that whole system balanced. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? So then on top of that is the signaling mechanism. And the signaling mechanism is the community wish list, right? So what do we want to spend some of these funds that we have accumulated on? So, and I didn't talk about that either. So Decred has scrapes off 10% of each block reward, and it goes into a development fund. So, and that development fund is actually very important because it does one thing that's a bit counterintuitive, but if you look at the history of Bitcoin, one of the issues that Bitcoin ran into is that a lot of these folks that were working on it were doing it voluntarily, right? So they were relying on donations from other people. But these people have to feed their kids, right? Kids need to go to college. There's bills involved. So in comes Blockstream, swoops up pretty much the entire development community of Bitcoin, and voila, we have a centralized development organization that essentially handles Bitcoin, right? So by having funds set to the side, we can actually go pay individuals, and so they can retain their individual opinion versus having a corporate opinion. So let me tie that back. So we have this pile of Decred, a giant pile of Decred sitting from literally from the dawn of time that we have collected, and we don't treat it as our money. We treat it as this is the community's money. So once this signaling mechanism is done, we are actually going to donate that pile of Decred to the community, and we are going to hand over the keys so you guys run with it now. So obviously it's going to be all encoded into the blockchain, right? So that people can make decisions and participate, make proposals. But it is going to be handed over, and we are going to try to remove ourselves from the equation.
Hey, Decred Moses, real quick, could you bless us with the number on the size of that pile? Like when you refer to as that pile set aside for the community? Yeah, well,
I want to say $60 million worth of Decred.
okay, all right. I just wanted the audience to kind of get an idea of the size of that pile that you were referring to.
Yeah, it's about 10% of the total value, right? Or the total market cap, I should say.
With atomic swaps, does that specific coin need to be compatible with atomic swaps, or is there certain coins that only have the atomic swap feature? And what you were saying, now we can just go meet in a marketplace open chat room, say, want to sell 10 Bitcoin for however many Litecoin. So what are the limitations of the atomic swaps?
Okay, so this is a good question. So the way atomic swaps work is they actually use the underlying Bitcoin opcode scripting language that exists today in Bitcoin. So when you transfer value between two parties, behind the scenes, you actually run a little program, and that is the one that actually executes the transaction and transfers the value. So we use that exact same language to do this. So what you need between two chains is having compatibility between those opcodes. Since the vast majority of these things actually came from Bitcoin, they all run a similar or compatible enough version of all these opcodes. So that is step one. So, and even if you extend it actually to Ethereum, they have enough of the things that we need to make this happen, right? So it's all about having those opcodes so that you can encode this.
Thank you for taking my question. What are your thoughts with NFC payments in relation to crypto? Do you see it coming, which is near field communication payments using your cell phone?
So If you asked me that last year, I'd say, it's going to be a while. If you ask me today, I think it is going to become a real possibility. So somebody needs to take up the, the task of it. But Lightning is going to actually enable that. So Lightning Network is going to enable you to basically walk up with your phone and do these payments. There's a lot of code between what I just said and in reality here, right? So there's a lot of code that needs to be written. There's a lot of detail that needs to be worked through. But the net is that now we have the tech available to us to make this happen. So soon. Don't know when.
So you seem pretty optimistic about Lightning. Is that across Bitcoin, Decred, or are you just optimistic in terms? Okay.
Now, so obviously
Just
the
to
Decred, since it's its own blockchain, it has its own Decred network, right? And part of the complications of actually getting the Lightning functionality is that we have to translate everything that was written for Bitcoin to Decred, the Decred version of that. So the good news is that the Decred stuff, that the Lightning stuff was actually started from our code base. So the guys that work on Lightning started using BTCD, which is our code. It's our Bitcoin full node implementation. And they started using that as the basis. So A, we had familiarity with the code. We wrote it. And B, it's written in Go, which is our language of choice. And so it literally is only a translation exercise. And by only, I mean it's only about 7 months worth of a really gifted developer to translate all that.
So a question about, is Politia, is that the right way to say it?
So the Greek folks in our community have told me it's Politeia. So that's what I've been going with.
Okay, Politia.
Yeah.
So question on anti-spam as well as settlement on that. So first how you, like you mentioned people just posting crap to it, how you handle that. The other part, let's say we propose a project, y'all fund it. How is settlement as far as like, hey, it's ready? How's the acceptance part of that handled?
Okay, so two things though. So the spam thing, we are going to put a couple of things in to just prevent it from happening. So you're going to have to put some Decred on the line to actually get signed up. Nominal amount, not a lot at all, like a couple of dollars worth, but just to make sure that not everybody just shows up and starts spamming it. So step one. So step two, we're debating. By the way, these are all very fluid rules, so don't hold me to it. This may change. It probably will change. So we are also thinking about, you have to put some Decred on the line to actually submit a proposal. So if you submit a proposal that is, not crap, you're going to get your Decred back. If you're just spamming, we're going to keep that, because I'm not going to say the word. So the second part of your question was, let me rewind here. The disbursement schedule, right? So the idea is that once you put in a proposal, you determine the payment schedule. So let's say you want to build a feature, it's going to cost you a Decred a week, right? And it takes you 10 weeks. So every week you should be getting 1 Decred as you work. Cheap feature, by the way. But that's how it would work, right? So you get to your, I'm losing a word here. So you are building in your own schedule, right? And you deliver what you were supposed to. Roadmap. Not a roadmap, that's another word. Man.
Release schedule?
Yeah, let's go with the release schedule. So anyway, but there's milestones is the word I was looking for, see? So you have these milestones along the way. So you have, in this example, you would have 10 milestones, right? So every time you hit the milestone, the voters have to ratify that you are still on schedule and therefore are going to get your money. If you disappear or you don't hit the milestone, you're just simply not going to get paid. But that's how that is the rough idea though. So as long as you're progressing and you show progress and the code is looking good, you're going to continue to get paid. If it doesn't, we're going to defund you. So, and of course there's going to be some swindling, there's going to be some losses, there's just going to be inevitable with a system like this.
So with with atomic markets coming to
Atomic markets, I like that.
or I mean atomic swaps coming to the market, and Lightning networks, what is your thoughts on, you're saying in the next couple of months, but to me what that means is that, well, now the people, the coins with stronger development teams are going to have an edge over all the other 1,500 cryptocurrencies because now they're going to be able to have atomic swaps and Lightning networks.
Okay, so what's the question?
What is your thoughts on the development time and
Okay.
adoption of that in the general industry?
So first I'm going to say something ugly, though. So there's a lot of garbage out there. There's a lot of garbage. And a lot of these projects should not exist, and they should actually be removed as quickly as possible from the face of this earth. So it's going to cost money to people, well-intended people who just got swindled. And I'm not okay with that. So seeing those projects die off, that is a great thing. And hope without too many losses to the folks that invested in them. So, as a company and as a project that has been doing nothing but development and has never focused on marketing, I mean, if you look at our market cap compared to some of these projects that promise the world and literally do not have a working blockchain, it is honestly painful to look at. It's like, okay, so you're worth $10 billion on paper, and you literally do not have anything working. So, I don't feel sorry for those guys, all right? So, show me the code, show me that it works, and now I'm interested, right? In the same with the atomic swaps, right? So, must be this tall to ride. And if you're not, sorry. Get a better development team, or get a development team.
Okay. Last thing I want to ask you, Decred Moses. So we have a lot of questions about on our channel about Lightning Network and atomic swaps, and I want to ask you this because you actually code on the blockchain. Some of the people that are making these types of rumors or commentary on the internet, they're not actual software engineers, so it's kind of hard to tell if their opinion is worth listening to. But in your case, we know that you are one of the top software engineers out there. The Lightning Network, there are people that say that you can lose your Bitcoins when you set up a Lightning Network channel. Is that true? Yes or no? And if it is, and then also the atomic swaps, right? Is there a possibility that someone can lose their tokens when they are performing an atomic swap? So in both cases, is losing your tokens possible?
Yes,
from
no.
your
Did I answer it?
Huh?
Yes, no.
Okay.
So the thing to note about Lightning, as cool as it is and as excited I'm about it, do know that it's still in beta quality. So there are bugs that are going to get shaken out. So currently at this point, there is a real possibility that you could lose your funds. So use it wisely, play with it, get a feel for it. It'll get better and it will get resolved. But today, I would not recommending moving $10 million in it, right?
Okay.
Pay for your coffee, and that is fine, right?
Okay, and since you guys were the first cryptocurrency project to perform an atomic swap between two different blockchains, and you're saying that that's safe, how does the audience know that is true and
Trust
that you?
me.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that you're not being biased because you're the team that did it first.
Right.
So how does the audience here that is not technical know that?
So this is a real tough question to answer. So honestly, don't trust me. Go look at the code. Not everybody here is a software developer.
Yeah.
So the only way I can offer you any any solace on this is that see how many people are using it and go look at the complaints, right? So if people are saying, "Hey man, I'm losing my my Vertcoin," well, that may be a bug, right? That's something for us to look at. I don't have an answer for you right now. I don't have an answer. So the only thing I can tell you is we tested it. We did our best to make sure it doesn't happen. We don't think it's possible,
Yeah.
but right, there are possibilities that something could happen.
Yeah, because I have not seen any complaints about people losing their tokens doing an atomic swap, but I have seen lots of complaints online. I mean, not a lot, but there are complaints online about people losing their tokens during a Lightning network.
So I would like to point out that the Lightning Network folks, who are, by the way, incredibly brilliant and do some amazing work, but they literally tell you, don't use it. So don't use it, right? And if you do, realize that there is there's a risk involved here. So calculate your risk. Is it worth losing $5 for a cup of coffee and try it out? Totally, that's hilarious, right? Man, look at that. I got a cup of coffee with Bitcoin. I'm going to pay off my house using Lightning. I would not do it.
Okay, all right. Okay. Any last questions about Decred, guys? All right, guys. Everybody give Decred Moses a hand, guys.